hear you go again. You say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down?
Introduction. Mutualism is a philosophy developed in the mid-19th century by a French philosopher, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Arose from his belief that a state was inefficient at meeting the needs and wants of individuals. He envisioned a societal structure built from the bottom up rather than the top down, believing it would be more efficient. Proudhon was the first to identify as an anarchist, though his definition differed significantly from the common perception of chaos. In his own words in an 1864 letter,
"Anarchy is a form of government or constitution, in which public and private consciousness formed through the development of science and law, is alone sufficient to maintain order and guarantee all liberties."
In modern terms, this means that groups of individuals can govern themselves within their communities, and people can act freely as long as they don't infringe upon the freedom of others. This implies the liberty to interact with whom one chooses and act as one wills, provided it doesn't involve harming others, using violence to coerce, or stealing. Mutualism is often misunderstood. Some perceive it as market anarchism with cooperatives, while others mistakenly equate it to anarcho-capitalism. While mutualism advocates for worker-owned cooperatives, it diverges from anarcho-capitalist ideology, which supports private property, landlords, and traditional bosses. Mutualism is fundamentally anti-capitalist, advocating for worker control of the means of production, reciprocity, and the blend of labor and subjective theories of value. It emphasizes decentralization and voluntary association. Mutualists tend to oppose what they term unearned income or unjustified income, which includes rent, taxation, interest, usury, and other forms of income backed by the state. As they see these things exploitative of the worker, they believe that rent, interest, and profit derived by those not directly involved in the production are capitalist in nature, representing unpaid labor. The core idea is that those directly contributing to production should be compensated, while those who are not should not. Understanding mutualism. Mutualism is an economic and ideological theory founded on voluntary association, cooperation, reciprocity, worker-owned markets, cooperatives, and decentralization. It often draws upon principles of voluntary cooperation and association, advocating for a society without central authority, where communities govern themselves. Mutualists believe that societies based on force and capitalism are inherently unjust and should be abolished. This includes practices like taxation, landlordism, interest, central banking, and any other systems that rely on higher authority to make decisions for individuals. Mutualists oppose central authority because at their core philosophy, it's based on the fundamentals of voluntary association and voluntary exchange. They believe that the state or central authority is inefficient at addressing everyone's needs simultaneously, arguing that the individual communities can operate on a peer-to-peer basis, which better serves individuals at a ground level and ensures everyone's needs are met equally. Most mutualists envision a society slowly evolving as the state gradually diminishes. They view societal dependence on state provisions like food stamps, Medicare, and minimum wage as attempts by the state to maintain its existence and keep people reliant, thereby suppressing alternatives. Conversely, they believe that communities can often provide alternatives for the worker struggling with finances, food, and other necessities. Reciprocity and mutual aid. Mutualism is built upon the concepts of reciprocity and mutual aid. At its core, reciprocity is the idea that individuals will respond to actions in a way that mirrors on how other individuals are acting. This is encapsulated by the idea, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Mutual aid is a similar concept, but with a broader application on how individuals cooperate. It's the idea that people help their local community or network based on the understanding that if the community helps them, they in turn will help the community, creating a mutual benefit. The communities in question can range from neighbors and labor unions to communes and any other form of collective built on reciprocal giving and receiving. Mutual aid is inherently built on reciprocity, as the cycle of giving and receiving within the community sustains itself. This can be likened to a gift economy. Mutualist theory of value. Some mutualists subscribe to the labor theory of value, believing value is based on the amount of labor required to produce a product. Others lean towards the subjective theory of value, where value is determined by individual perception. However, both sides agree that the state, capitalist wage labor, rent, corporations should be abolished. Most modern mutualists adopt a blend of both labor theories, implying that value asserts not only from the labor used to produce a product or service, but also the individual's desire or need for that product or service. This can be termed subjective labor value. As Kevin Carson argues,
the labor theory of value, properly understood, is not incompatible with marginalist insights. The distillery of labor is itself a subjective valuation, and prices tend to reflect the subjective cost of labor as perceived by the worker.
While the debate between objective and subjective theories of value has been significant among mutualists and other anarchists, many modern mutualists acknowledge the value of labor time while also considering the subjective desire or need for a product or service. Capitalism and property. Mutualists and other leftist ideologies view capitalism as inherently unjust or unethical, believing it to be detrimental to the planet, workers, and production itself. Mutualists argue that the means of production should be controlled by the workers who earn their labor, rather than the higher authority extracting their earnings from the top down. They also contend that central banking is inherently capitalistic due to its anti-decentralized nature, which mutualists oppose. Property ownership is another significant point of contention with capitalism. Mutualists assert that to own something, one must be in active use of it, the principle of use it or lose it. This doesn't mean that simply walking away from your car to enter a store signifies abandonment. You are still using the car as a means of transportation. Mutualists define abandonment of property as a complete lack of use. In contrast, most capitalist theories state that if you buy something, you own it regardless, as seen with landlords who acquire significant property and rely on others to maintain it. Mutualist alternatives emphasize use-based property and advocate for decentralized banks or blockchains where the individual manages currency. Mutualists envision currency being managed from the bottom up by workers rather than the top down. This would involve individuals competing with existing currencies instead of having a single centralized currency, thereby promoting decentralization. Mutualist revolution. The question of how a mutualist society would be achieved elicits various proposals. Some mutualists advocate for change through counter-economics, unionizing workers, or through small-scale peaceful revolutionary reform of society. Counter-economics involves workers operating outside the state through markets that do not contribute to the state's capital. This would gradually deplete the state's resources, leading to its collapse over time, replaced by worker cooperatives and mutual aid societies. This includes practices like unreported transactions, ethical black and gray markets, alternative currencies like Bitcoin, and untaxed open-air markets. Unionizing workers focuses on building worker unions within workplaces like factories, farms, and retail establishments. This empowers workers to engage in strikes, boycotts, and use of mutual aid to improve working conditions. A revolutionary reform suggests that people will gradually realize the benefits of a worker-based society and reform the state into a decentralized society, ultimately rendering the state obsolete. Technology and modern mutualism. Modern mutualism heavily relies on technology, which pervades our 21st century society. Technology enables a contemporary revolution through 3D printing, peer-to-peer transactions, and decentralized currencies. Such technologies foster up a bottom-up structure that aligns perfectly with mutualist principles of self-governance. Mutualists see 3D printing as a tool for independent production, breaking up state and corporate monopolies. Decentralized currencies like Bitcoin, built on blockchain technology, create a peer-to-peer basis for global trade, with value determined by supply and demand, rather than by a government or private entity. Peer-to-peer transactions extend beyond Bitcoin. For instance, a virtual time bank allows individuals to offer services or resources in exchange for others. An example of this would be offering music creation in exchange for a cybersecurity check on one's computer. This technological influence has transformed mutualism into its historical roots into its contemporary form. History of mutualism, then and now. While Pierre-Joseph Proudhon is considered the father of anarchism and laid the philosophical groundwork, mutualist ideas and movements extended prior to him. Robert Owen, a socialist pacifist, initiated the New Harmony movement in 1826, which focused on worker cooperatives and decentralization. Members of this movement even used the term mutualist to describe themselves, laying some foundation for Proudhon's work. The Knuts of Leon, silk weavers who formed worker-based communities and practiced self-reliance, also influenced Proudhon. Proudhon, 1809 to 1865, reframed these ideas into what we now know as mutualism, articulating his core concept in his book, Property is Theft. After Proudhon's death, mutualism became a staple in individualist philosophy. Benjamin Tucker, an American anarchist in the late 19th and 20th centuries, translated Proudhon's work and integrated mutualist economics into his journal, Liberty. Tucker criticized capitalism, arguing that its exploitative properties stemmed not from markets themselves, but from state-backed monopolies such as money, credit, land, tariffs, and patents. He argued that these monopolies created unearned income, exploiting workers by taking their money without contributing to labor production. In the late 20th to 21st centuries, there has been renewed interest in re-evaluating Proudhon's work. Thinkers like Kevin Carson has been instrumental in distinguishing mutualism from anarcho-capitalism, asserting that capitalism enables practices like rent, interest, and usury, which mutualism opposes, while simultaneously advocating for worker-owned markets. Modern mutualist thinkers like Carson are critical in synthesizing the labor theory of value and subjective theory of value, arguing that the value derives from labor invested in a product or service and the individual's desire or need for it. The idea of voluntary association, reciprocity, mutual aid, and even mutualism itself has set the ground for many philosophers. Today, Proudhon's ideas influence and inspires workers around the world to create a tolerable working environment under capitalist society, while also being anti-capitalist itself. Mutualism has its place in the liberty movement and school of thought. This peaceful idea of society has a fundamental piece of his puzzle that we are trying to solve with markets and equality, promoting the idea of freed markets, cooperatives, and voluntary association. Mutualism isn't a perfect idea, but it envisions a better society that we should strive for.
Well, if you're not a communist, what are you?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I dislike all forms of government,
Somebody must rule.
and I don't like the word rule.
Well, if we don't like the word rule, let's call it leadership.
Leadership in government is political power, and political power is an official form of antagonizing the people.